Greetings, everybody. My name is Sindisiwe Mhlongo, and it has been a long wait before we launch the scales of justice. But today, I'm launching in big and I'm launching in heavy with someone that I consider a brother to me. And we're going to go into the details of how I got to meet the man, the legend, Mr. Barry Bateman. As everyone is aware, the reason I started my podcast was because I found myself at the receiving end of how the criminal justice works. I found myself, even though I'm a qualified lawyer, not knowing where to go. And at some point, I was literally having a breakdown, going into social media and asking for support. And when I went wild and someone said, tag Barry Bateman, I tagged Barry Bateman, and my brother's case has not been the same. To refresh your brain, but I'm sure you guys have seen the story 1,000 times on social media. Xolani Kunene was shot and killed in August 2022. And that would have led us to this moment here where we are launching Scales of Justice. And we really want to break down with what is happening in our systems, our criminal justice system, and how many victims are there, because I'm not the only person. Without wasting any time, I first want to welcome Barry. Barry, welcome to Scales of Justice.
And thank you so much for having me, Sindisiwe.
I'm very, very excited to have you here, Barry. And I can't wait for us to go into, everything that is happening in this country, because you've been a journalist for a very long time, quite a prominent figure, and you have dealt with so many things in the public. So I want to talk first and foremost about when you responded to me tagging you on X. Because for me, when I read your profile and said someone tag Barry Bateman, I was like, I had been tagging so many famous people at that time, and I just thought I would. And I had tagged other journalists, actually, for that matter. So I thought this will be another one, but what do I have to lose? And you responded so fast, I was taken aback. And, we just basically have kept moving to this point. What came to your mind when you saw me reaching out to you?
Well, we were just surprised and, flabbergasted that you were a victim of crime in a criminal justice system that had clearly let you down. It was just absolutely astounding, given that there was video evidence of a man shooting your brother in the car, your brother falling out of the car, the man walking around and shooting your brother in the head, and then you're telling us that an investigating officer and a prosecutor are engaging with the family to try and negotiate monetary compensation, and that the accused person accepts a culpable homicide case. It's just unbelievable, and that's what our office does. We assist victims of crime trying to navigate this very difficult and collapsed system, and we are more than happy to assist people such as yourselves. Because that's what we believe in. AfriForum's private prosecution is all about that. We exist because the criminal justice system has collapsed. So when people like yourself and your family come to us, we help.
It's very interesting, Barry. And as a law student, I remember learning on private prosecution. And I think I probably was oblivious to it. We see the headlines. There was the Senzo Meyiwa case. Then you start seeing there's this private prosecution thing. But I guess you never know how something will affect you until it lands on your doorstep, and suddenly you learn how the system works and the frustrations everybody else has to deal with. And I think that is quite mind-blowing. So before we go into the thick of things, tell me, Barry, what does justice mean to you?
Accountability. There must be consequences for the actions that people do.
Yeah.
And it's what drove me to become a journalist. I mean, those first early days, it was, apart from the excitement of going to riots and things like that as a young journalist, but I developed into this idea of holding people accountable, of watching people at all levels, doing things and getting away with it, with acting with impunity. So for me, justice has always been about holding those people to account, whichever mechanism might be. In this case where I'm working now, it's criminal.
Yes.
But it has always been other levels throughout my career.
Okay. And I want us to go into that a bit. The concept of justice, would you say it is something that inspired you to be a journalist? So what is it that actually attracted you to being a journalist? Like thinking back, you were a child at some point and you had to choose a career.
It was never my first career. I mean, when I left school in 1997, IT was the rage. Everyone was doing IT. That was the cool thing to get into. And I went and studied an IT-related course, how to fix computers and things like that. And I got a job at a little computer company in my hometown of Emarasheni, Witbank.
Okay.
And
you fix phones as well?
No, this was before fancy phones are today.
Okay.
But that company moved into website design. And before there was website where Facebook and all of these things, I was commenting on websites and I developed a love for writing and expressing political opinion, not a political, but opinion on what was happening in current affairs. That's the better term.
Okay.
I mean, I was writing letters to newspapers. So, this is the type of thing. And it was a progression that, and I love my parents for this. I got to a point and I said to them, please, can you send me to go study journalism? And they assisted me and I came to Pretoria and got to live out that dream and that goal of taking what was something on the side that I enjoyed commenting about to actually getting into an industry where my job was to speak to people, tell their stories, write for newspapers, and then ultimately radio and television. So it was a progression. And now I'm moving into another stage. I'm now into a public relations type of sphere in the criminal justice sector. So my career's never been static, but I suppose at the heart of it, it's always been this quest for, as we just discussed, justice and accountability.
I like that, Barry. As professionals, I always say that we can always pivot. That's what the training is all about. But that's not what we're discussing today. So you publicly announced that you're joining the AfriForum Private Prosecution Wing a couple of years ago. And I feel like, with my brother's case becoming public, the topic of private prosecution, you just come to realize that not a lot of people know that there is that option. But also there's a cost factor that's associated with going the private prosecution route. Could you just explain for my viewers what private prosecution is?
Well, it's governed by Section 7 of the Criminal Procedure Act, and it is an option for people who have a direct interest in a particular case. For example, where in your instance, if the state declines to prosecute, or any person where the state declines to prosecute, but that's the important aspect as well. The state has first bite of the cherry.
Yeah.
They must assess the case and they must make the decision based on the evidence not to prosecute. Then that person who has that substantial interest or direct interest, a family member or somebody that was affected by the crime, can then apply for the nolle prosequi certificate, and they can initiate the private prosecution. But there are huge limitations. It's not that simple.
Yeah.
You spoke about the financial implications. Somebody who wants to go down this route, you have to put down a huge, like a deposit, if you will, for the defense. In the event that the private prosecution fails, you have to cover then the costs of that individual. So it's hugely prohibitory, but it is an option available for any individual who is affected by crime. But that's why this unit, the AfriForum Private Prosecution Unit, was established, is because it needs to be, I suppose if you want to call it mainstreamed, given the countless failures of victims of crime, that it should be easier to be able to initiate that process to prosecute the people who have harmed you. Okay.
And what's the criteria? If someone is going through the same thing now and they want to get in touch with the AfriForum Private Prosecution Unit, I know how I did it, but I would assume that's not the standard. Are you often getting the cases off the headlines, or do you just get people approaching you privately?
It's all about people approaching us. And we do have a case management process, and we have a case manager. There's an email address, onsvervolg@afriforum.co.za, and you hear that name, onsvervolg. We prosecute, which is Afrikaans, but that's what the email address is. And please send us an email, and we have a case manager who will assess the case, whether it meets the criteria. There needs to have been a criminal case that was opened. It needs to have been investigated. It needs to be in the hands of the state at some point. I just want to, and the case will come in, and we'll have a case manager who assesses it. Can we assist? Is it within our scope? If not, we'd provide the advice. Rather go here, go there. But I must stress how the unit over the years has changed somewhat. Private prosecution and dealing with selective prosecution is the core mandate. But given our experience, we do a lot of the cases where, such as your case, it's not that there was a decision not to prosecute. It's that it was being mishandled. The police weren't, and the state wasn't doing what is expected of them. And we can assist in matters like that where there is scope for us to assist. Okay. So the office has expanded far wider, but private prosecution remains the core.
Okay, that is good to know. And, Barry, I've also recently learned that you studied law and you have graduated. Is the work that you're doing with the AfriForum and the private prosecution unit the influence for that decision?
I decided to study law when we finished up, or during the Oscar Pistorius trial. Because it thrust me into this environment, and many other journalists, where we were spending months, weeks on end in courts. I mean, prior to that, I'd done a lot of court reporting, and I was experienced as a court reporter. Yes. But this was different. The whole country was coming to grasp with terms like dolus eventualis, and it inspired a different way of looking at the law. Normally, as a journalist, you would go and you understand procedure, for example. That's important to understand, and you go through the process. But this created a different way of thinking about it. We were living it. We were going every step of the process. And I enjoyed it.
Yes.
I found this very interesting, and I wanted to have a greater understanding of the law. And that's what inspired me to go and register. And I graduated last year, which took me long enough, but I got there. The point is I finished it and I've got my LLB. But what it has allowed me to do, so when I left journalism, and I moved across to the private prosecution unit. Yeah. I've taken my role differently in that I believe in the newsrooms today, there is a lack of understanding of the law, of procedure, and so on. And I hope to build that bridge between the law and newsrooms. And I take my experience as a journalist and what I know and understand about the law and procedure and so on, and I assist our unit in sending that message. So I'm still very much involved in journalism and I love it, but I've just taken that step further in my progression in my career.
Okay. Love to hear it, Barry. And I do think that this country is at a point where we need skilled people that go into research about what they are doing and execute with absolute precision. That's exactly what we need, and it's exemplary. But let's talk about what's happening right now, moving on to current affairs and discussing the criminal justice system, because this is why we're here, right? You suffer and you are part of the criminal justice system or the justice system as a whole. Do you think private prosecution is where this country is headed, and looking at, commissions that are happening right now in the public sphere? I mean, we saw first it was the VBS scandal, and now we are dealing with the Madlanga commission due to one officer, I stand to be corrected, standing up for what is right and basically exposing what we've long suspected, that the officers who are supposed to be investigating the criminals on our behalf may be compromised. And everything that is being said at the Madlanga Commission is just suggesting that we are basically under siege, because the justice system is supposed to be independent, credible, and is supposed to be speedy. So tell me about your observations about the Madlanga Commission. I mean, I've seen a lot of chatter on social media about the line of questioning that is happening there. You've been observing that. What are your sentiments when you watch the Madlanga Commission play out in public?
Well, first of all, we got and I'll say at our tribe, we got a bit of a controversial view. We don't believe that there was an officer that took a stand against crime.
Yeah.
General Mkhwanazi came out and he made very serious allegations about there's all sorts of things happening in the criminal justice system. But what is being done today after those recommendations of the Madlanga Commission that could not have been done prior to that announcement? we believe that what ought to have happened is that all these allegations were known. Everything was happening within the police service. There should have been dockets filed. There should have been affidavits put into those dockets. And the cases should have been investigated. We shouldn't be hearing allegations and leading evidence in commissions of inquiry. They should be made in a court of law. If the goal for accountability, and that must be the core goal, is criminal justice, because whatever a commission finds, whatever the ad hoc finds, is not going to have the same deterrent consequences and the justice for society as a criminal court. But we're hearing evidence and all these things in the public domain, wherein in fact they should be heard for the first time, being led in a criminal trial. So we have our skepticism about that, and we believe that it should have been criminal cases first. But our involvement in this matter, and we're not directly involved in the broader issues happening at the Madlanga Commission, or we've got nothing to do with the ad hoc commission, inquiry rather, in Parliament. We've got a client, the family of a man by the name of Emmanuel Mbenze. And it emerged during the evidence of a man by the name of Marius van der Merwe last year that Emmanuel Mbenze was tortured and murdered in April 2022. Mr. van der Merwe was, we understand it now, a Section 204, or as we understand it, was a 204 witness in early 2023 already.
Yeah.
It dates back. And this case wasn't moved with. The docket wasn't presented to the NPA. The matter wasn't gone. And it was the family of Mr. Mbenze who contacted us 2 days, and we consulted with them first after that evidence of Marius van der Merwe. They heard for the first time the details of how their loved one was tortured and murdered when that evidence was presented at the Madlanga Commission. And that's why they approached us. It's just like you, sick and tired. For years they've been told the investigation's going, arrests are imminent and so on. And nothing happened. And when we got involved, we started engaging with IPID, which was investigating this case. We got confirmation earlier this week that apparently now the docket has been handed to the DPP for a decision on whether or not to prosecute. But in the interim, we know that Marius van der Merwe was murdered. He's your 204 witness. He's the one who directly implicated other people in the murder of this man. We're concerned that IPID's delay has allowed the scope for witnesses to be intimidated and murdered, and there's other things that have been taking place. What hope there might be for a successful prosecution in holding those accountable for the murder of Emmanuel Mbenze. So we're deeply concerned with what's happening. The police must just get on and do what they're supposed to do, investigate cases. If there are allegations and senior management becomes aware of malfeasance within their ranks, open a case, compile a docket, fill it with affidavits and give it to a prosecutor and move on it.
And the question now, Barry, is why do we even have to repeat this on social media, on podcasts, in the media, if there's adequate and competent and ethical officers that are being employed by our government? It's quite a concerning state of affairs that we are living with. And just let's bring it back to journalism as well. Do you feel right now in the media sphere that there's accurate reporting when it comes to these kind of commissions, and that, journalists, it can be twofold. One, still have the freedom of speech, being able to, use their influence to hold our institutions accountable, and also whether there is a deliberate effort from our journalists to be, committed to what they present to the public and present it accurately. Do you think that, enough chatter is there in the media about the need for the criminal justice reform?
I've got two responses to this. And the first is, let's look at the work that journalists are doing in exposing criminality. And I think the best example I can provide is the work of Jeff Wicks at News 24 Investigations.
Yes.
He has exposed this entire network of Kat Maklala and links at the Tembisa Hospital, billions of rand.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the work of Jeff Wicks, and he hasn't stopped, and he won't stop. He's got it in his heart of justice for Babita Deokaran. And I admire him immensely for the work that he's doing there. There are many other journalists, and I'm not isolating Jeff, there's many other journalists doing that kind of work. And it is so important for democracy to shine a light on these things. We are seeing it coming out that some of the work that Jeff has done is being not relied on, it is being presented at the Madlanga Commission. But I've got another view in that in terms of journalists and the media in the coverage of the likes of the Madlanga Commission and the ad hoc commission in Parliament. And that is, and it's not all journalists, but it's a broader perception, and this is of the public as well, is that the narrative has been created and people have bought into this idea of that there are good cops and there are bad cops. There are no good cops. What you have is a continuation of a decades-long factional battle within the SAPS for a fight of access to resources and power. And that is what we're witnessing happening here. What should be going on is that these people should be prosecuted and there should be action within, but it's not happening. And I think the public debate has now created, or things have happened that has created an environment where certain people are identified as the criminals or bad people, but other people are elevated to the status of gods. You can't question them. Anything they say is the gospel truth. And I believe that is a very real danger, where certain people in very powerful positions in the SAPS are now beyond reproach. And it should never be the case. We should always question power. And I believe journalists need to be alive to that. The public needs to be alive to that. There is something far bigger happening, and just be mindful of the power plays and question everything.
Okay. That's a powerful statement, Barry. And I have a follow-up, sort of question to that. In your view, which institution in the criminal justice system requires the most urgent reform?
Crime intelligence. Get rid of it. It is the problem with any intelligence environment is that there is no proper oversight. You can hide behind national security. You can hide all of your conduct behind this veil of we're doing it for security reasons. And I'm not saying anything here that's new or controversial. This has been the criticism for forever. We go back to the days of Jackie Salibi and the efforts to prosecute him. Crime intelligence was involved there. They were interfering in witnesses for the state. They were grabbing witnesses, getting opposite statements, trying to undermine it. It has been ongoing. The evidence of Robert McBride during the ad hoc committee was perhaps the most telling. When it was put to him, are you saying that the slush fund is being abused? And he says, there's never been a time when it was not abused. And that's what we're dealing with. I mean, you can't have an organization where there is such a lack of integrity within the broad organization of SAPS that can hide behind secrecy and have access to vast resources. That's a problem.
That's a very interesting view. Somewhere in my head, I thought you would say, because you're in private prosecution, it's definitely the NPA.
Well,
how do you feel about, the NPA right now?
Well, let's start at everything's got to work together.
Yes.
We've got this idea, and I'm just going to go back to the police again, and everyone's focusing on crime intelligence. Crime intelligence doesn't solve cases. Detectives solve cases.
Yes.
Detectives gather the evidence, put it in a docket, and they give it to a prosecutor.
Yeah.
But that whole chain, in our experience, is damaged. Okay? Go to any police station in this country and go and ask for 50 dockets. Go and read the A1 statements in each one of those dockets and tell me if you can work out whether there's sufficient evidence in there, assuming that there is a crime that was committed, to support a prosecution. You've got, the moment these dockets get given to prosecutors, they've got to send them back and say, go take a supplementary statement because the elements of crime are not met. Or there's this outstanding, that outstanding. So from your first line, the first person who takes an affidavit from a police officer, there's a failure there. And that has to then move across to the NPA. Now, we've got incredible criticism of the NPA. is there reform needed? I think there needs to be managers, and this speaks for the SAPs as well, to ensure that people are doing their jobs. Where you've got senior prosecutors, don't sit behind a desk. And my boss, Advocate Nell, says this all the time. You've got senior prosecutors with decades of experience sitting in offices. Get them in courts. Go prosecute cases. Lead by example.
Yeah.
And this is not happening. So it's not structural reform per se. It's more about ensuring that the courts or the NPA functions as they should within the courts. That's where we step in because these things aren't happening. We had a case of culpable homicide down in George. A docket sat on a DPP's desk for a year on the simple decision, should it be heard in a district court or a regional court? It cannot be. What is that?
Yeah.
You can then start reasonably inferring that this might be on purpose. We're not saying it is. But people start thinking when justice is delayed like that over a simple decision. And I mean, we were writing the letters. We were exposing what was going on here, but we just get ignored. But it finally has been enrolled, and we will stick with the family to the end.
I'm happy to hear that, Barry. And you are right. Justice delayed is justice denied. With the way the machinery is moving right now, just to throw a spanner in the works, do you feel we are at a position where we should be charging the state on the international stage to say that they are failing to deliver justice to their citizens? Obviously, this could be a subjective opinion from me because I'm a personal, victim of the justice system being slow in this case because the case is ongoing. I have to be fair in my assessment. But still, you have a case like my brother's and other cases where it's straightforward. The evidence is there and people are still having to wait 4 years. And when it comes to the sentencing that is happening, are we learning from what's happening in international communities around how the justice system and the mechanism moves very swiftly? Is there a case to be made that we need to take it a level up in terms of challenging our current institutions? And I understand that you're saying it's the crime intelligence, but isn't there a holistic picture of saying it should be functioning from end to end? Are you hiring the right people? Are we getting the right professionals who are passionate about what they are doing to implement change and actually honor this constitution we've been complimented to that seems to be collapsing because it's a well-written document, but the implementation and the execution of service delivery and honoring the rights of the citizens is looking questionable when you're looking at the Madlanga Commission. So that's the question from me. Do you feel that we need to take this argument to the broader institutions that we are signed to in terms of the treaties we're subscribed to?
No, I don't think there's scope for anything international. What we need to do is, and I'll take you back to our case of Emmanuel Mbenze,
yes,
where we're nearly 4 years from the murder, and the docket was handed over to the NPA earlier this week for a decision.
Yes,
where you had a 204 witness at the end of 23. We have not ruled out the possibility of pursuing defeating the ends of justice charges against the officials involved in this year.
Yes.
If it turns out that, we've still got to have a decision on whether or not there's a case. If it has turned out that this matter cannot proceed or there's certain accused that cannot be held to account because of the failures of the IPID, we will not rule out defeating the ends of justice. The same might apply in your case. There are people involved there who were seemingly trying to strong-arm a family into accepting monetary compensation and accepting a charge which is utterly ridiculous.
Yes.
We'll follow the case to the end and we'll see what the eventual findings are, but there might even be scope there. I think that should really be what the public and people should be considering. The officials that don't do their jobs must be held accountable for possibly defeating the ends of justice, and there must be criminal consequences. On the people within the organizations, and I think we've seen some people testify at these commissions.
Yes.
And you ask your question, how did that person ever get into a position of authority in an organization? Mm-hmm. The way they testify, they shouldn't have been gone past constable level. Mm-hmm. The way they deal with people, they don't understand, or well, let's put it this way, they claim or let on as not to understand concepts of conflict of interest and things like that. What has created that environment? So we're shocked that the man is entirely incompetent to testify there. Who promoted him? Who put him in that position? And go down the rank. So go from the very top and start going down the rank. I mean, I'll give you a previous example of a very senior police officer who should never have been there, is the former head of the Hawks burning in Clemeza.
Yes.
And I was at a press conference once, and there was a lot of things happening in the media. It was controversial. And I think it was Minister Nathi Nhleko who was sitting next to him. So you had the head of the Hawks and the minister. And I kept putting questions to burning in Clemeza, and the minister kept answering. So my follow-up question was, why is he here? What are you doing? And there, I think, explain it. So you got people, politicians, appointing people into certain positions, not because they're good at what they do, but because they might be useful for other reasons. And I think that is replicated throughout the structure. Mm-hmm. And that is why we find ourselves in the position that we do.
Mm. Noted. Barry. Now I have an interesting one, and I'm sure my viewers will love to hear about this one. 2019, you were at a press conference. Oh, yeah. I was burning to ask this one because I don't think I've heard you speak extensively on it, because it became a rather intense thing. And, I have a position on it. There's Julius Malema. He's become a prominent figure in politics and in the media, someone to be followed around. And if I recall, the circumstances around that press conference was that he was being charged by the Hawks for discharging a firearm.
He was being questioned. He had to go in there for a warning statement. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And now you go into this press conference. I don't think it was an exchange per se. You're caught on record expressing a frustration, rather. And do you feel in that situation that the exchange, or what you said rather, became overarching over the core thing, which is what we were discussing earlier, journalists being able to question and hold public figures accountable? Do you feel that the discourse took away from the focus?
I was caught out. It was I won't be the first, or I wasn't the first, and I won't be the last journalist for an on-air gaffe.
Yeah.
And it's not a highlight of my career. And what upset me the most about it, if you go and watch everyone focuses on what I said, or in the short lead up to what happened, where someone was losing their temper or whatever the case was. But if you go a little bit further back, at the time there was another case that was pending, and it was the assault case of Julius Malema against a police officer. He was eventually acquitted on that.
Okay.
But at the time, it was in the news, and I led a series of questions, because it was an impromptu press conference. We were all standing around.
Yes.
And there was a series of questions that I put to Mr. Malema, and I basically got him to admit on record that he assaulted the police officer. He says, if that is assault, well, then I assaulted the police officer. Okay. And that's when he turned the conversation towards me.
Okay.
You're right. It became what I said thereafter was an entire distraction.
Yes.
It was after what had happened. There was a colleague on the floor, and he made a comment to me as I made the comment to him. We were laughing about it. And I immediately got on the phone to my editor at the time. I said, "You won't believe I got the soundbite from Julius Malema, basically where he admitted to doing this and that." And then everything broke, and that whole aspect. And I was satisfied with the work that I did as a journalist in asking my question. And it got entirely distracted. So it's not a highlight of my career.
Yeah.
All these years later, I can laugh about it, and people still do laugh about it. And, it was last week somebody posted the video again, tagging me. He said, you see, he dealt with this one. So,
I believe we all have our moments when we are having exchanges with people, even in professional settings.
You know what?
It happens quite a lot. And you become the unlucky one when there's
when you get caught on air.
Recording devices around it. But then for journalists, aspirant journalists looking at you now, watching you and all the growth that you have done, because you've gone on to achieve greater things beyond that, because one moment in a career cannot be defining in life, as a matter of fact. That's the philosophy. We can always make a mistake and laugh about it later. But what would you advise a journalist around navigating high-pressured press conferences, especially when they're dealing with powerful individuals who, hold a lot of influence in our country?
Hold course. Don't lose sight of what you are doing. And there are many journalists who do that. But I think for the younger guys out there, don't be swayed by whatever popular opinion might be. And we spoke about it earlier, where at the moment, if you are questioning a certain level of power, that is acceptable. But if you ask any questions about another sector or people, you are then branded as far as being part of a conspiracy, being part of a cartel. So you can't ask those questions. Put that aside. Do what is right. That is always the thing that you got to put your head down to.
Yeah.
Hold course. Do what is right. And ask those questions. So, and the bottom line is you've got to hold power to account. So the advice I would give to those journalists is just do the right thing, hold course, and don't stop asking questions.
Do you hold the view that journalists are still powerful instruments for the implementation of justice? And what does the future look like?
I do believe journalists are powerful in holding institutions and people to account. It has changed over the years. So there was the traditional media, and it has diluted some of that, and you've got other people doing that kind of work. But I'll give an example of our office. We thank the media every day for the work that they do in highlighting our cases. Without their work, we wouldn't be able to put that pressure on the NPA and the police to do their jobs. So journalists and journalism still plays a huge role in maintaining democracy, holding people to account, and asking those questions that regular members of the public sometimes don't have the access to or don't have the platform to ask those questions.
And Barry, how do you stop yourself from getting emotionally involved? I mean, you get people like me, and I'm sure it's a countless other cases. I mean, I'm aware of some of the cases that are happening. The private prosecution unit, I mean, it has also inspired me to say, let me be the lawyer that I always dreamed I would be. Because, we always dream about our careers, but we get lost in what's happening in the world. You should be commercial. You should be doing that. So I like it when I see a professional stepping out, connecting to the humanness that we need, Ubuntu that we need in this country, and being a brother in an instant. But I can also imagine that it can be draining, because some of the cases, the private prosecution unit are horrendous. I'm hoping to be able to highlight some of those as we go along. But for you as a professional and a human and a father, how do you keep yourself grounded and centered as you deal with people who are dealing with so much psychological trauma?
It's difficult. And you do get invested because cases don't happen quickly, as you know. So over time, you get to know the victims of crime. And we see it as a frustration when we have to work through the criminal justice system. For the people who are the victims of crime living through it, it's devastating. When you go to a court and it's postponed yet again, it's an injustice at every step of the way. So, I mean, I go back to the Mbenze case recently, and the framing of it. The allegation was that Mr. Mbenze was a suspect in a case, and that's why the police were at his house to go and do this operation or whatever. There's no evidence whatsoever that Mr. Mbenze was involved. But the public discourse took over that, because remember, Van der Merwe was the hero. Witness D was speaking out.
Yes.
Let alone the fact that he admitted to torturing Mr. Mbenze himself and dumping his body. He was hailed as the whistleblower, and Mr. Mbenze, his name was not known until we got involved. And this story, I have got quite invested in it because I believe there's a significant injustice in not just the fact that Mr. Mbenze would, but he didn't have a name. And even this week, it was the person who was shot at Viandre Pretorius, they said that he was simply mentioned at the thing. And there was, again, no acknowledgement of the victim at the core of this, and that is Mr. Mbenze. I'll give you another example, and that's the case of Jaco Pieterse, the principal down in the Eastern Cape who was falsely accused of raping a child. We know now, and it'll come out eventually, that it did not happen. There was no rape. It simply did not happen. And there was a campaign against him that had taken long before it became public knowledge or exploded.
It became international news even.
But there was this campaign that he was involved, and there was this request from, let's just say, there was this request that he must give his DNA sample. And the request was made to the police for no lawful reason whatsoever. And he exercised his rights. And he said no. And he came to us and no, give me a lawful reason why you want my DNA results. And it took off. The mere fact that he exercised his rights and said, just give me a reason why, was sufficient evidence for his guilt. And that's what the whole campaign, and this man, he's lost his career. He had to move out of his house. I mean, there were people following or loitering around his house. He received death threats. His daughter was threatened with rape. And that, it upset me so much. And no matter how much I was going public and saying there is no evidence, I had to fight it, and nobody would listen. Because the logic was, and it's this crazy logic, well, if he's got nothing to hide, why didn't he give his DNA sample?
That's the common logic, yes.
It's ludicrous. It was just, reductive reasoning that it just, but there was an injustice. And that really upset me. And I'm still fighting that one. Okay. And there are many others that we go out in public for, but it's difficult not to get invested where you're dealing with people who are deeply harmed by the injustices in this country.
That can happen. And that's quite an interesting take, because there's people who get affected by what happens in the criminal justice system, like myself. You have your sibling that's been, basically killed in cold blood. And then you have someone who can be accused. But this makes this a bit more interesting than Barry. Because remember, from a subjective level, of course, I'm required to be objective because I'm still a lawyer, right? From a subjective level, it's okay. Let's talk about what our criminal law says. It says innocent until proven guilty, and then you have instances where there's video footage, like in my case, and then you have the instance of the principal where there's no video footage and there's perception, and how these two can basically clash when it's all meant for a good reason. Do you feel that the lack of service delivery around making sure criminals are prosecuted effectively and efficiently, because does that frustration almost put the public in a position where they want to be the judge and the juror? Do you think the impact is actually that, as opposed to attacking an individual? It's the delay in justice and the experienced frustrations around it. Because I would imagine, and you could comment on this, in that case of the minor that was, everyone thought that this assault had happened. There's been so much reporting on it that honestly, when I tried to look up that case, I just couldn't understand which one is the actual standing version. Because at some point I saw a version that said it wasn't the principal, but his relative may have been involved.
TikTok.
Those are all TikTok opinions. So with journalists also being at the helm, how much do you feel that there was sufficient reporting around this case to cover the accuracy of the facts?
So first, on the first question related to public perception and why there would be such a emotive response to it, and you're absolutely right. The system has failed. People want justice. The system has failed women and children and the most vulnerable in society. You have rape cases that just, from the moment the woman would go to the police station, she's failed there. If she fights and the matter's finally enrolled, she's failed by the investigating officer, or it gets to the courts and she's failed there. So it's fully understandable that society demands answers. In this particular instance, there was a very different campaign that was happening in the background. The police had already made the decision in November of 2024 that there is no case. At that point, the police had all the evidence. They had done everything. I mean, the mother went with the child to the Tutuzela Care Center. There was all the forensic evidence available. But there was this campaign that she continued, and whenever she got an answer at one level, like, for example, the station or the local prosecutor said there's no case, it was escalated, forum shopping, basically, until it became a public thing. Mm-hmm. The police had it in their power from day one to say there is no case. But they're too scared. Ooh, if you go and you say, because you can't not believe, there's this notion, and it's right because you must take it seriously, but you can't buy into that when the evidence shows completely the opposite. So I fully understand that the society demands answers, but there's also a duty upon the police to not allow somebody else to fall victim to a public vilification campaign because they themselves are too scared to come out and just state what is the honest position.
Okay. Thank you, Barry, for coming to the Scales of Justice. And, as we're about to conclude, we've discussed so many things, and we know what the criminal justice is supposed to be doing for the people. I am certainly an advocate for criminal justice reform and the change that is needed. I'm also a passionate advocate for humanness, Ubuntu, and understanding that our stories do matter and that we should be heard at every level. Now, Barry, I just want to ask you too. Let's go on the lighter side of town now as we are getting into closing. One, who is your role model? And two, what's your favorite quote?
Role model. I've always pondered on things, and I don't have any particular individual.
Yeah.
Over time, you develop different. I'd rather say people who are mentors and people who you learn from. Advocate Garinel.
Okay.
Absolutely. Learning every day. My other colleague, Andrew Leask, he's an old investigator, old Scorpion, learning something new every day.
Met Andrew.
You've met Andrew. I mean, fantastic people. I don't really have role models that are, famous people or people like that there. Through my career, I've learned from fantastic editors.
Yeah.
Katie Katapodis of Eyewitness News. She's made brilliant careers out of dozens of journalists because she's got an eye for news and she's a great manager and she understands people. So somebody like that, I would certainly, a mentor and somebody I admire deeply. So no one individual.
Maybe you are your own role model.
No, it doesn't work like that. Famous quote, and I suppose it is the Serenity Prayer. And it takes its cue from Stoic philosophy, which draws on Stoic philosophy. Now, I can't remember the exact way it goes, but it's basically learn to accept the things that you can't change in life and have the courage to change the things that you can and have the wisdom to know the difference between the two. And another Stoic line is that we suffer more in imagination than we do in real life. And that's not to burden yourself with things that you can't change and focus your energy on those that you can. And I suppose that's a quote or something that I would draw on in life.
Barry, thank you so much for coming to Scales of Justice. And there you have it, viewers. This is our first launch episode. You are welcome here if you've been a victim of crime or if you are within the criminal justice system and you have strong opinions about where we should take in this country. This platform is for innovators, people who see life beyond what it looks like. I value positioning the problems and then offering the solutions. It's not going to help us to become desktop keyboard warriors. We have to do tangibles. Here is how we started. How we continue and make impact is up to you. There's an email on your screen that you can reach out to around stories you would like flighted on Scales of Justice. Signing out.